Hello and welcome back to Analog Comics. Today I'm going to talk about Hellboy's new adventure, The Bones of Giants. And when I say new adventure, I don't really mean it because this is actually a very old adventure. It's old in many ways because this was written a long time ago and also it is placed in a timeline of the Hellboy, the main story, far back. But despite that, the comic itself is only quite recently published, and I think I need to kind of explain what's going on. This is a peculiar publication for many reasons. Well, first of all, it seems that Hellboy albums, they just keep coming, despite the fact that the big run, the main story, has been finished years ago. This really is a classic Hellboy story. It's actually set in so far back in the timeline of Hellboy that there is the old duo of Hellboy and Abe Sapien having together this adventure. But let's clear out first that thing that why is this story old but the comic publication is new. The Bones of Giants was originally a prose novel, you know, the kind of book where there is no pictures. Except in that one, there was pictures. It was written by Christopher Golden and it was illustrated by Mike Mignola. And this comic adaptation, because this is an adaptation of that novel, this came about because it's now the 20th anniversary of that novel. Personally, I have not read any of the Hellboy novels. I know that they exist, there are more than one out there, but I'm not really into those novels. I know it's meant to be kind of pulpy reading, which Mike Mignola loves. And so he wanted to have those kind of stories going together with the Hellboy. But the original idea of The Bones of Giants, the novel, was never to be canon, so to speak. Because it was done, 20 years ago. The whole Hellboy series was in early stages. So Mike Mignola could not have foreseen what kind of monster he really created, that Hellboy is going to grow into this massive franchise he has built. So it was supposed to be just fun reading for the fans of Hellboy. And Mignola has stated himself many times that there was never ever intention to turn that novel into a comic book. But here it is. And it's actually a very good Hellboy story. I really like the fact that it's just Hellboy and Abe Sapien, the two best pals, just doing what they do, solving mysteries and fighting monsters. And it's kind of weird to get a story to the main Hellboy storyline now, years after it has been finished. But in order to manage that, they had to do some time acrobatics. The original novel, the prose novel, was set in 1999, August 1999. But this comic, when it starts, it says September 1988. So they pushed it into another time slot. Now, if you read Hellboy, you know that many stories have a date when they start. There's a year and usually even a month. So if you're a very picky and die-hard fan, you can follow Hellboy's journey month by month, and that creates a challenge because Mike Mignola and his team, they need to plan so that certain adventures were even possible. You know, if Hellboy was this week, Monday, on New York, he can't be the next day fighting something in Australia. So that kind of logic, they had to move around, and apparently February 1988 was free. I am not that diehard with the dates, so I don't know if this makes really sense or not. But anyway, they moved the comic version of this story to 1988. So I think this makes many readers ask, well, is it canon? Well, if you ask me, this is canon. This is a very normal Hellboy story. Now, the fact that in the end they did adapt the prose novel into a comic book makes me ask, what about the other novels? Are they going to be adapted into comic form also? Hellboy is a Dark Horse series and they are very willing to keep milking every dollar they can get from the series. And by the way, I am not against it at all. I am going to keep them all the dollars possible. But having said that, there might be now possibility, maybe if this sells well, someone in the ivory tower will think about, what about the other novels? You got the stories here ready. Now we just have to find an artist to do it. Well, as I said, I have not read those novels, so I have no idea how they fit the Hellboy theme, the tone, the main storyline, or any of that. But that's not the only question that this publication made me think. You see, in my previous Hellboy themed video, it was about the Sword of Hyperborea. Earl Grey, who has a comic channel too, it's actually really, really nice. You have to check it out. But he was thinking that maybe he should buy that Hyperborea trade paperback, although he is a fan of omnibus collections. Because he was thinking that there will be no more omnibus coming from Hellboy. Well, I commented that with a terrible certainty that of course there will be an omnibus. It's Dark Horse, it's Hellboy. They will squeeze out an omnibus if it's possible. But this question from Earl Grey, for some reason it stuck in my mind and I couldn't get it out of there until I realized why. And here is the reason. The latest Hellboy themed trade paperbacks, the Sword of Hyperborea, Young Hellboy, The Hidden Land, now the Bodies of Giants, and then there's a fourth one. I actually was supposed to have it already, but the packet was damaged on the way, so I had to reorder it. But so there's already 4 new Hellboy themed trade paperbacks, but they are all in hardcover. So this being hardcover is the thing that might support Earl Grey's theory that there will be no more omnibus collections. Maybe in the ivory towers of Dark Horse, they don't even know themselves yet what to do with it. So they rather publish it in hardcover, like just put them out as single issues, but in a bit more deluxe version of hardcover rather than the soft covers. And the stories here are quite far apart time-wise, so there's not a lot of connection here. But having said that, usually the omnibus collections from Hellboy, they are made from 3 trade paperbacks. Abe Sapiens, for example, here, and also my PPRDs there, they all have 3 trade paperbacks, and it makes 1 omnibus. And here we have 3 trade paperbacks. And as I said, there's also that 4th one which didn't arrive on time. But so that was one of the questions we discussed with Earl Grey. And he said that there won't be omnibus. I said that there will be, and time will tell which one of us is right. Okay, so there was quite a lot of little details around the book rather than about the book. But I think it's good to go through them as the Hellboy world keeps growing and the directions where it's going are surprising, like this one. This was surprise also to the creators, as they said that they were never intending to turn the novel into a comic book. So anything can happen. And as this is a channel to talk about comics, so let's talk about comics. Before jumping into the content, let's look at the object, the book itself. As I already mentioned, it's a hardcover, it's a trade paperback, it collects 4 issues, and there isn't really anything spectacular on the front. There's a Mjolnir. Mjolnir is always spectacular, so I guess I was wrong. And a massive giant. Giants are also spectacular, so I'm still wrong. There's the title, story by Mike Mignola and Christopher Golden. And the way it worked was that Christopher Golden, he wrote the novel, and Mike Mignola did illustrations to the novel. I have not seen any pictures of that. But it's good to know if you are one of those fans who want to have every marking Mike Mignola has ever left on paper. So you need to get the novel also, because there is some of his art included in there too. Art is by Matt Smith, and it's a really good art. It's some kind of hybrid between, I guess, normal art, what other Hellboy artists would do, and what Mike Mignola would do. He is drawing more lifelike, like normal characters, not as blocky as Mike Mignola, but there is that kind of line. There is a lot of hints to the line of Mike Mignola, but it's definitely not a copy, but it's a very nice nod and hats off to his style. Colors by Chris O'Halloran and letters by Clem Robbins. And it also mentions that the cover and the chapter break art are by the Matt Smith also. And here we have the first chapter art picture, and then it goes into the story. Then let's look at the back. There's the synopsis, black page. There's a list of, as usual, the Hellboy stories, the rest of the stories in the Hellboy-world, the PPRD. Then there are the usual end of the book sketches. If you read Hellboy, you know that there's a lot of these, and they're quite fun. Yes, Hellboy and Abe Sapien. Hellboy says, "It's just a warm-up sketch, Abe." Abe answered like, "Go to hell." And then we got to the actual sketch pages. I always enjoy them in Hellboy books. You have the character studies here, and then just few lines here, but they usually give you more insight to the way they develop the characters, and who said what, what Mike Mignola wanted. Did he give, freedom to do whatever, and where the artist got his ideas from. So it's fast and easy to read, and yet they managed to put enough info here. Like here they are talking about these Norse mythology dwarves, and how they had to do certain details on them so that the reader can manage to know which one is which. And one of the characters was based heavily on the story, the novel story also. There's quite many pages of these. And as usual, I don't show you the last page of the story to keep away from spoilers. As for the story itself, I had to think what to say about it, because it's a basic Hellboy story where Hellboy and Abe Sapien, they meet monsters and adventure, and they need to beat the hell out of everything on the way. So it makes no sense for me to explain all the steps that happen in the story. But what is obvious, even by looking at the cover, is that this has to do with the Norse mythology. I don't think I'll spoil anything if I just say what happens in the couple of first pages. The story starts somewhere in Sweden, and there's a massive lightning strike. And a person finds a big skeleton where the lightning struck. There's a massive skeleton, and then there's a hammer next to it. A hammer that no one can lift. And I think it's quite safe bet to say that most of you know that then it has to be Mjolnir. And it doesn't take long until Abe Sapien and Hellboy arrive at the scene to help out the local authorities in this matter. So no one is able to lift the hammer, and on top of that there is constant lightning striking to it. But as it happens, of course, when Hellboy arrives, he just picks up the hammer, and when he picks it up, a massive lightning hits his hand, the big hand. Yeah, it fuses the hammer into his hand, and he can't get rid of it. It's one of those Hellboy, oh crap situations. And that's just the start of the story. One thing I need to mention to all the detail freaks is that this story involves a character from the Hellboy past, and I mean past, because there's a character called Eichmann, Professor Eichmann, and Hellboy had one adventure with him in a story called King Wold. And it was long time ago, and it was published in a trade paperback, The Right Hand of Doom. This is the volume 4 of Hellboy trade paperback, so it's really early story. And it was written for this collection, for this collection. And so we get to see again Professor Eichmann, if you remember that character. I actually had to go back and read the story, who he is, and it was kind of funny that they still wanted to meet, but I will tell you more about that. Oh yeah, and that King Wold story, it's placed in 1956 in the Hellboy timeline. And this giant Bones of the Giant story is 1988, so there's quite a big time gap there. But after that, Hellboy fusing himself with the Mjolnir and meeting Professor Eichmann, it's kind of just downhill there, and it's a race against time again to save the world, because the evil collecting there is threatening not just our world, but whole the 9 realms of Norse mythology. And this allows all kind of creatures from that mythology to kind of leak into the story. And it also creates these funny Hellboy moments. And I just love to get back to that moment when Hellboy is just beating the hell out of monsters and giving his laconic comments while he's doing that. Like there is this very fast instance where he gets frustrated and just hits through the wall with his hand, and then suddenly 2 dwarves appear there, and they are starting to kind of mockering Hellboy, like, yeah, just have a tantrum, like that would help. And Hellboy just looks at them like, oh, where is Snow White when you need her? There was quite many of those moments. They're like golden Hellboy moments, and I was just enjoying the old school ride of Hellboy beating the hell out of the monsters and having those laconic comments, and having his old pal Abe Sapien, just him, and they were together solving this issue. Abe Sapien and Hellboy, they just have this dynamic that I always liked in the series. It felt like the good old days, like as if you found a story, like missing story, and suddenly it was there. Oh, there's one more to the main line. As for this being an adaptation from the novel, there was just few moments where I kind of saw it. Like usually when there's a book, even if it's a short one, you have to, if you make it into a comic book, you just kind of have to squeeze the story, to compact it a little bit. There were a few moments where I kind of thought that maybe there was more here in the book about this thing, and there was one particular moment that it just happened within a few panels, but I assume that in that novel it was a bit longer fight. This is not a deep book. This is a Hellboy adventure, so there's nothing, you're not missing anything profound. And to be honest, I don't really want to say more about the story itself. I think it was more important to explain how and why this book came to be at all. Why there is now a new story within the main line. And I just wanted to raise also the question of, will there be more omnibus collected now that there is enough trade paperbacks to do that? And of course, will there be more Hellboy stories converted, like adapted from the novels into a comic book format? I have not read any of those novels, so I don't even know if they are good material. And I have no idea where they would fit in the timeline, or if there's any way you could fit them into the timeline without breaking it. Because Mike Mignola, he really tries to keep the comic book timeline intact, and I really love that. That's one of the reasons why I love the whole Hellboy saga. It's one of the most consistent worlds you can find. Okay, but enough of that. You already know enough to know if you want to read it or not. And I'll thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.